Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Periodically, we've had some discussion on sacred texts, and as Unitarian Universalists, we can really use a variety of sacred texts and stay within the framework of our faith tradition. But today I found a good example, I think, of the tyranny of the sacred text. Now, this is the official Tournament Club and Wordlist official dictionary for the game of Scrabble. This is the sacred text. If it's not in here, it can't go on the board. It's just the way it works. Okay? So yesterday, I found this book at a book sale, and it's called Scrabble, and it helps you, and you memorize words, and it gives you good words. So it's a help. And if you play Scrabble, how many of you have played Scrabble? You know you want to get that Z on a double or triple letter and work it so you get 40 to 60 points, right? Because it's worth 10 points. So in this book, I discovered a word. It is DZO. And it's an animal. And I thought, wow, I've never heard of that. So I was pretty excited, right? Now here's kind of a sub-book of the sacred book. But I know that if it's in a sub-book or if it's in a commentary, it's not quite sacred. I understand that. So I have to go to the sacred book to find out if this is going to have standing, if that word's going to have standing in the game. And guess what? It's not in here. The tyranny of the sacred text. I know it's a word, and now here's how that works, the tyranny of the sacred text. I'm going to be sitting there playing Scrabble. And I know there's going to be a perfect spot for DZO. And my head's going to say, I want to play that. But I know if I play it, I play with people that honor the sacred text. And if it's not in the sacred text, it can't get in the board, so it has no life. See? The sacred text is limiting, if that's your only sacred text. It's limited to its worldview. I'm going to be aggravated. It's a future aggravation. I'm working on my Buddhist meditation, not to be aggravated over a future event I'm going to be aggravated to, but I've already stepped into the future and I'm already aggravated about it, and I've got to work through that. Maybe that's my spiritual cutting edge. Find all kinds of examples. Before I get to the sermon on talking about the idea of generosity and that fourfold sequence that the Sufi teacher teaches, I thought, given some of the recent history, I would kind of try to get an idea of placing ourselves as Unitarian Universalists and as people in this society and in this culture, place us in historical context. And really, the only way to place ourselves in historical context, which is the dynamics of the day, what's going on today. When somebody looks back 30 years from now, what will they say about their history, our present? So that's the historical context of the present. It's always hard to do, because how do we really reflect upon the immediate now and try to get an understanding of it? Well, one way to do that is that you look through history and you try to find places that are similar to where we are now. And if you can find a place that is similar to where we are now, you can predict our future somewhat. It's not an absolute, but somewhat. Okay, so for example, in, I believe, 744 BCE, King Josiah of the nation of Israel needs to firm up the nationalism, because the country, he's kind of afraid of war. So he needs to firm up the country for the war. So what he does is he determines that his country's weak because they have these foreign religions in the country, and in these foreign religions in the country, they had foreign temples. They just wasn't all Jewish. They had foreign temples. So what he does is he scapegoats the foreign religions. He mainly goddesses, was the religion of goddesses. and he bans them from the land and puts them under a penalty of death. And then he boisters the nation of Israel through a sense of nationalism by scapegoating the weaker. That's what he does. 744 BCE. Homosexuality and women are the targets of that scapegoating. 1930s in Germany. There's a movement toward nationalism coming out of a horrendous depression in Germany, fostered by the treatment of Germany by the Allied forces after World War I to punish Germany and take advantage of Germany economically, but put the people in Germany in a terrible, impoverished situation. Out of that comes this drive toward nationalism to unify the nation to become the fatherland again. In that process, the scapegoating of women, it is patriotic for the women of Germany to have babies for the war efforts. Scapegoating of women and using women in that way, and the scapegoating of homosexuals. We can see a pattern moving through that there are three things that go on, at least in these examples: scapegoating of women, scapegoating of homosexuals, and a fever around religious effort. And I'm saying today, whenever a presidential candidate says about another presidential candidate or a sitting president, this person is not biblical enough, we need to raise a flag. I'm not saying it's good right now. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not even saying it's inaccurate. But I know when there is the scapegoating process already going on in the culture of a particular group of people. I know when there's a scapegoating of gender. And I know when that gets tied to religious fervor. When I look back in history and I see those three dynamics, it has not been a good outcome. The nation of Israel ended up dividing. We know what happened in Germany. And since the 1980s, in this country, we've had a religious fervor. As a matter of fact, the present Supreme Court that many of us are aware of, the 5 people that voted for Citizens United, and that was related to a religious fervor, putting people in office, and those people appointed the Supreme Court judges. Just fact. It's time to raise a flag. When we see those three things operative, we need to raise a flag. It is not time to be passive. Now you can imagine my impulse to bring that up and then bring a sermon up about generosity. But isn't that the way, though? That we have to hold both of those realities in tension, and we have to address both those realities. We have to address the historical context, what's going on in our present. There's one presidential candidate, somebody finally said it. He said our country is slipping toward fascism. Finally said it. I mean, many of us have been believing it, watching it. And fascism, simply defined, as some of you know, when corporate power and government power form the laws for the people. That's fascism. Period. So, in our historical context, it is not. But in the same time, how do we nurture ourselves spiritually? Because we have to do both. And I'm going to tell you, it takes a strong mind to do both. Because how do I deal with those three elements coming together, knowing the history that when they have come together before, it has never boded well for the nation in which those three elements get together in a strong way. It's never been good for the nation. Has not. And maybe you can find an example of it. So I have to deal with that. And we do. We invite earth jurisprudence in, which is confronting that and those kind of things. And then I also have to take a deep breath and nurture myself spiritually. I have to do both. So the best I can do is take that part of my mind and say, okay, we're going to take care of that. And then move on to these ideas about generosity. And I'll begin with a quote. If you consider Albert Einstein good company, then we're in good company. A human being is part of the whole called by us the universe. A part limited in time and space. A part limited in time and space. A person experiences themselves, their thoughts, feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of their consciousness. They are not experiencing what we call the whole, the universe. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires, to our affection of the few persons nearest to us, to our community, to our religious belief, to our political belief group. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison and widen our circle of compassion and care, and embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Nobody is able to achieve this completely, but the striving for such achievement is in itself of the liberation and foundation for inner security. I'll take that. I like that. We're in good company with Albert Einstein. A quote from Thomas Berry about our spirituality. And this has really got my mind, I won't say twisted in this context because that might not be good. Twisted is not good. But it's got my mind turned around. How do I deal with that? And he's talking about earth spirituality. Now some people get confused when we talk about spirituality and we talk about religion. Mostly when we look through history, we see that religion has an object to it. Some people say if Buddhism became their religion, then Buddha would be the object of their religion, but I know Buddhists try not to do that. Christianity, the Trinity, or an emphasis on God, the Son, or the Holy Spirit, they may become the object of their religion, or Allah can become an object of a religion. But there's this external process. For Unitarian Universalists, our 7 principles could be the object of our religion, the external process. But in this earth spirituality, there's not really an object. There's more of a participation. We participate with the whole of the universe. We don't worship the universe. We don't worship the earth. We don't worship something other than ourselves. It's actually a different way of understanding and feeling and sensing, I guess, this sense of worship. It is a participation. There is an equalness to it all. We participate in the unfolding of life. And I think that's what this quote is moving toward. Earth spirituality. The spirituality of earth refers to a quality of earth itself, not a human spirituality with a special reference to the planet Earth. Earth is the material principle out of which we are all born, and from which we derive all that we are and all that we have. We come into being in and through the earth. Simply put, we are earthlings. The earth is our origin, our nourishment, our educator, our healer, our fulfillment. At its core, even our spirituality is earth-derived. The human and the earth are totally implicated, each in each other. There is no spirituality in the earth. If there is no spirituality in the earth, there is no spirituality in ourselves. Since all of who we are is derived from the earth, and if we are spiritual beings, then that spirituality must originate in the process that was brought forth from the earth. Whatever spirituality is, it comes from the unfolding of the ingredients originating billions of years ago. In other words, Spirituality existed before the human. Spirituality existed before the human. We are in the spirituality of the earth. We're not on the earth. We're not above the earth. We are in the spirituality of the earth. When the astronauts left the atmosphere of the earth, defining earth, atmosphere has to be included in that definition, they didn't say, oh, there's the dirt and there's the atmosphere. They said, there's the earth. That's our home. That included the atmosphere. That included the central part of the planet. The whole is the earth. We are in the earth. And the earth is the origin of our sense of spirituality. And the spirituality, we join with the earth in our spirituality. And that is the way. That is the way it is. That's different for me. I guess in an odd way, when I stand up, I'm not really standing up, I'm standing through. If I'm in it. It's a crazy thought, isn't it? But really, I'm walking, as we define earth as dirt and atmosphere is one, when I'm walking through the earth. I'm not walking on the earth, I'm walking through it. I'm in the earth. And I'm wondering if this way of thinking, this worldview, because it is a worldview, if this way of thinking wouldn't move me to say, if I'm moving through the earth, that which I'm moving through, I want to be clean. I don't want to move through something. Have you ever had to walk through something that you knew was yuck? And you said, yuck. I don't want to do this. You had to do some of your own plumbing. Yuck, I don't want to do this. Right? You don't want to walk through toxic. I can remember being, when I lived in Denver, got the highest paved road in the world in Denver, 14,000 feet. What a treat to drive up there and be there. But in driving back, down out of the mountain of Denver, I'm here, Denver's here, where I live, I'm looking at a severe brown haze. I'm driving into that haze. Yuck. I wonder if I can make and work my mind so that I can see I'm moving through the earth, if that wouldn't help me understand the need to have a clean earth. Now this brings us to the idea of generosity, in that when we talked before about this fourfold spiritual process of the Sufis, remember the first part was to have faith in the words of the prophets. The second part was praise. The third part is generosity. As I was reading through that, I'm a skeptical person, as maybe you can tell, but they need to be reversed, the first two. The praise needs to come first. The words of the prophet through time need to come second. And here's why. I don't want any language. I don't want a language, or I don't want words between me and my pure sense of involvement with the planet and with others, if I can help it. I don't want to be, in a sense, in an attitude of worship or an attitude of praise and have words directing me or conforming me to a particular worldview. I want to have that attitude of worship and that attitude of praise where I am free to participate without being bound. I want to be free. And if the words of the prophets come first and the praise comes second, then that praise has a relationship to the words of the prophet. I want to have the praise first so that when I turn around and re-enter the world, I can evaluate the words of the prophets in relationship with my experience of liberty, in relationship with my experience of freedom. I want to put that in dialogue with the words of my faith ancestors. I'm just not going to take the words of my faith ancestors as an absolutely true that I have to conform to them. Then I'm not free. Then I'm corralled somehow. So praise and worship in this sense doesn't have an object. You participate in it. And for example, when have you sat by the ocean, closed your eyes, and you just listen to the waves? You didn't even know you're listening to the waves. Until 5 minutes later you open up your eyes and think, oh, I'm here. Has that ever happened to you? Or you're sitting on your back porch and who did the buntings? And you're hearing the birds sing and you get lost in the birds singing. You're participating in that movement of the earth when that happens. You're not other than that sound. You're part of that sound. I had this experience the other day. I was riding a bike down this road and I stopped and there was this pond. And so I'm going to go sit by this pond. It wasn't much bigger than this room. And as I'm walking toward the pond, these white birds, who aren't egrets, something else, these white birds, about that big. It's a whole flock of them. And they come and they land, and at the same time they land, I hear the wind. And the wind's getting stronger. And the next thing I know, in the center of the pond, the wind is swirling in a circle in the center of the pond, and these birds, they fly over to that whirling wind. They stop, they held out their wings, they stop, and the wind just takes them. It was amazing. Then the wind left the pond, and the birds immediately left. Now, I was taken by that, and to me, I'm going to call that an attitude of praise, where I am captured by the whole. It's very pleasant. Now, afterwards, I thought, how did those birds know that wind was coming? Because the birds came, the wind was there, the birds apparently enjoyed themselves. I don't know, what did they do? They spread their wings and the wind took them up, and as soon as the wind was gone, they were gone. What an amazing experience. How do I interpret that? It was just wonderful. So now, if, at least in this sequence of 4 things, we put the praise first, that experience first, because I don't want to take that experience and go necessarily read some book to tell me how I should have experienced that experience. Or you ever have an experience and you try to tell somebody and they say, oh no, it was like this. And you're going, no. And your experience gets dismissed. Speaking of scapegoating women and gay people, their experience of this world gets dismissed and somebody imposes how they ought to be in this world rather than allow the unfolding to take place as the earth unfolds. I mean, it all fits together. From that attitude of praise, through the words of faith ancestors, through the words of whichever poet, whichever singer, whichever artist that writes the words to the songs that moves you, sacred literature. So we have this experience of praise. Through that, we can work and use those kind of words. Then generosity comes. Generosity is the relational expression of those experiences that are pure. Generosity is the unfolding of the earth and giving us oxygen and giving us water and giving us food. And we got a cherry tree out in my front yard. It's not really a cherry tree, but something out in the front yard. And I can go out there and I can eat it. It's great. That's generosity. The planet, the universe is generosity. It gives us what we need to live. We say gifts, and I guess you can say gifts, but in a way, even gifts is labeling it and makes it other. It just is. Generosity just is. in my work as a person living in a culture that would move us away from that kind of view or that kind of experience, my spiritual work is to notice the birds in the wind interacting. And to feel that, because it wasn't just the birds and the wind interacting. I was there and I was interacting as well. I'm part of that process. You're part of that process. Generosity is the movement of life from the depth and the sense of who we are as participants on this planet in relationship with one another for us as humans. That is generosity. And all movement comes from that first initial attitude of praise. It is the deepest way of our being. It is part of our planet. It is part of the universe. And I was thinking, well, how do you talk about generosity in this culture? Would we say that our church is generous? Would we say that we are generous? Would we say that our local government is generous? Would we say that our government is is congruent with this sense of generosity? Would we say that? If generosity is deep within the structure of the universe itself that gave us life, anything that would interfere with that must be considered not generous, stingy, greedy, restrictive. Anything that would interfere with the flow of life. Anything. So when I hear forget just the policies that promote. You have a general talking the other day. He says, I think it would be a bad thing if we went to war with Iran. Not prudent, is what he said. Good. Thank you. Ron Paul, they asked him what his foreign policy was. You know what he said? Peace. That's generosity. Peace. That's generosity. If we're not moving toward life, then what are we moving toward? Peace is generosity. That generosity is deep within you. If that's so, how do we nurture that generosity? You witnessed it today. How many kids did we have up here?
8.
Bunch of kids. They're kind of noisy. These two little girls were hugging each other and loving on each other. Wasn't that beautiful? Right? It was wonderful. Bob didn't say, "Be quiet." Pay attention to these words. It wouldn't have worked anyway, but it's a hard group to corral. But that was generosity. We bring these young people up here. We are saying to them, you are special to us. That we are taking time out of our adult life. You are participating with us. Come on up here, hear this story, be in front of us. Let us as adults, and for I'm going to say most of us, we enjoy that. The sound of the children. Just life itself. Come up here and let us experience the life of those children. That's generosity. That's generosity. We express it all the time. I think we need to say, that's what that is. And I can feel it. And anytime we have an experience on the ocean where we're listening to the waves, we go, I'm here. Or by a pond where the birds in the wind are interacting. Right after that, you're in a good mood. You're very pleasant. There's no way in the world after that experience are you going to come out with something mean and hurtful and doesn't move us toward life. So if we build those experiences in our life, so that that's part of our spiritual practice, to put us in an environment where we are captured by nature in that way, we are going to be kind to people. It's just how the universe unfolds. If we experience that sense of life from watching trees blossom to oranges growing, and we see that life coming, and we participate into that, with that, we will be a kinder people. This week, forevermore, not this week, fling your arms open to the sky, to the trees, to the water, to the dirt. Fling your arms open to one another and feel that goodness. Then we will begin to know and mature to what is these people are calling earth spirituality, because we are part of that movement. Let's step into it in recognizing we are in the earth and a participant of this process and rejoicing.
Quick comments, questions?
Yes, sir.
This is what you were talking about earlier as far as being able to let go and being able to enjoy pretty much everything and everybody around us, especially myself, in today's youth. How do we get a chance to not ignore a lot of the negativity, a lot of the materialistic things that are going on that are suppressing us from happiness? Like how do we get closer towards enjoying these moments and enjoying these, let's say, the birds and the ponds, when we have so many obstacles? I'm not saying we close ourselves out into like a minimalistic life, but how do we enjoy all these moments, and then how do we, how do we work through all that negative yuck? How do we approach the positive with that negative yuck?
The first, for me, I have to build inside of my head a voice that says, you need to take a walk. You need to go out. You need to ride that bike every day you can off in the air. So I have to make time for that experience. I have discovered about me, if I just listen to things that I disagree with on the news, or things that I think are horrible, or the threats of war, or the threats of energy running out, we're not really doing the infrastructure to prepare for that in a 30-year thing, or whatever that peak oil crisis is. I think we're under, maybe we're not, but I think we are. If I don't do anything about it, the part of me that is alarmed because of it is a good part of me. I need to be alarmed when there's a threat. I mean, we humans are built it. There's a threat. I need to be alarmed. If I don't do anything about it, I numb that part of myself out. And then I move into denial that it's actually happening and it's going to be all right. Somebody else is going to take care of it. We don't have to worry about it. We're going to get another planet. We're going to get heaven and earth. Whatever belief system I use, so I don't take action. But what I found is, if I do something about it, like this church did something about it yesterday, inviting that guest speaker to come. We did something. If I do something about it, I don't repress it, nor is it as intense in a way that I have to numb myself out, some self-destructive pattern. That, okay, I'm being responsible. In that sense that I'm being responsible, I am freed up over here to attend to my spirituality. I'm not numbing that side of me out. And I can deal with it that way, and I need to, but I do need to be attending to it. If I'm not attending to it, I know myself, I'll numb it somehow. So I have to be attending to it. And if I'm by myself trying to deal with it, I'll numb it out somehow, because it's too much. We are creatures that were not meant to be alone. We are creatures that were not meant to suffer alone. We are creatures that were not meant to see a danger and deal with it by ourselves. That's not who we've been for a million years, or however 200,000 years, or 60, however you put the formation of the human mind. We were born in villages, in communities, in groups. And if there was a problem, we worked with that together. So if I'm by myself interpreting these struggles, I'm depressed. if I'm not by myself and I can feel support, I've got the energy that when I have the time and I look at my bike, I'm going to go run and jump on it and ride. Right? But if I'm depressed, I'm going to look at the bike, I'm not even going to have the thought to go ride the bike. It'll get cobwebs. Look in your garage. The things that you could use to enjoy and that would exercise your body. How many of you got that device sitting around that's got cobwebs? Yeah, all of us. We lost our body, the sense of body. And that's what this other spiritual part is. As the earth moves, our body moves. We get in touch with our body, and then we don't get depressed. So I do have to do both for me. Is be responsible for what I see, try to find a community that will help me and support me in that process, but also go sit by the pond and watch the birds and interact and get lost in them. But the community is essential for me.
Right, this is just semantics, but I was really struggling when you were talking about us being a part of the whole of the earth, which includes all the realms of the earth, all the spheres of the earth, and then you're talking about walking through it. And I'm thinking, in the worldview you're trying to get us to see is that we're walking within it. And I felt like when you were saying, you kept saying walking through, and I kept getting stuck on it, because I was like, well, if we're actually a part of the system, then we're walking within it. We're not a separate being walking through it. And for me, it was just, I had to actually, it was hard for me to get past that semantic to actually see myself there. And I just wanted to share that concept that we are part of it, so we're within it.
Yeah.
It's just small, sorry.
I'll work on it. Yeah.
Taking your first example of the Scrabble, where you're limited by those 7 letters in front of you, and you're limited by the rules of what words you can form. I get the same feeling about the topic that you were talking to me about in words, that cannot do justice, that what I need to do is be at that pond with those birds, with that wind, and I can talk about that for decades, and it's not the same as experiencing generosity and the earth and the whole thing.
Thank you. If we're not practicing and having the experiences, then there's part of us that's not breathing and having life. You've got to have the experience. You know, we find that really in the deep Christian beliefs and Buddhism, you find a movement toward direct experience. And it's what the